Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Luke Cage Season 2. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review the Marvel Netflix shows. In this video, I will be covering Season 2 of Luke Cage in its entirety. So if you haven't seen all of Season 2 of Luke Cage, you will not want to watch this video. Otherwise, some things will be spoiled for you. So, I was very impressed with this season. This season took me by surprise. I did not expect it to be as good as it was. In fact, I would say this is up there with some of my favorite seasons of the Marvel Netflix shows. Up there with like Punisher Season 1 and both the Jessica Joneses and Daredevil. In fact, I'd probably say this is almost better than some of those. This might be my favorite season. Oh, maybe not. Maybe Daredevil Season 1 was better, maybe Punisher. Hard to say, but it's up there with it. And it's funny because I didn't think as highly as of Season 1, and when I started watching this season, I actually didn't care that much for the first couple episodes. After the first episode, I honestly didn't really want to watch the show because it seemed to me like Season 2 was just going to be a rehash of what they did in Season 1. They weren't really presenting anything new or fresh, and I thought they were just going to tread the same sort of ground. In fact, from the trailers of Season 2, that's what it looked like to me. I wasn't excited for this season because it looked like they were just going to retread what they already did in Season 1, and it actually took the season a while to get going before it hit that sweet spot, before I really loved it. But by the end of it, I thought this season was amazing and definitely one of the better seasons of these Marvel Netflix shows, which really did surprise me. And what I liked about the season so much is the fact that it took risks. It went in different directions. It went in dark directions. And I think that's the best sort of these Marvel Netflix shows. This is why I didn't care that much for the Defenders, because that was really white bread. It seemed like they were trying to be family friendly, trying to be stereotypical superhero stuff. But the Marvel, because you already have the Marvel movies, the MCU movies for that. They're the typical superhero stuff, but they do it well and they do a really good job at it. What made the Marvel Netflix shows stand out as different and unique in their own right is because they take a more dark, more risky tone. And I felt, honestly, even though I did like Season 2 of Jessica Jones, I felt the past 3 seasons of these Marvel Netflix shows, Jessica Jones Season 2, The Defenders, and Iron Fist, were not doing that. They were coming off as a bit not willing to take any risk and taking the more stereotypical superhero route, which is, as I said, MCU already does that. I like the Marvel Netflix shows for being dark, having these anti-heroes, and that's what the Punisher did so well. That's why the Punisher Season 1 stood out. That's why Daredevil stood out. It had, particularly the Punisher, because it had these anti-heroes that blurred the line between what is good, who's the hero, who's the villain. And I love how Luke Cage Season 2 did that. In fact, it was a progression, because at first it was very clear that Luke Cage was the superhero and Mariah was the villain, the enemy. But as the season went on, this line, not just with Luke Cage and Mariah, but all the various characters, particularly Mariah's Daughter, as the season went on, the line between this and all the various characters, who is good and evil, got blurred. I mean, there's still characters by the end of it who are definitely not good and had done a lot of evil shit. But you see the lighter side. You see the side that you can identify with them. And with the heroes, like by the end of it, you feel like they're not really that big of a heroes, that they have a darker side as well. And I love that. I love that dynamic. I love that complexity. I think that's what the Marvel Netflix shows do so well, and that's why I think this season really hit for me. Now, the other thing I think is really worth mentioning is pacing, because that's where I think most of the Marvel Netflix shows have failed. And in fact, I think this is something that they have corrected recently. However, a lot of people weren't that happy with how they corrected, because I think with Iron Fist and with Jessica Jones Season 2, both of these had really good consistent pacing, because the previous all the seasons, even the Daredevils, Luke Cage Season 1, all that, they would blow through the storyline too quickly. So by the time you got to episode 9 or 10, the story, they would just make something up to tack on to keep the show going for another 4 episodes. And I did even feel that Punisher did this as well. So it had inconsistent pacing. That's led to so many people saying that these seasons should be shorter, and people are still saying that. But I would say, like with Iron Fist, Jessica Jones season 2, and this season, they actually pace it better so they don't blow through the storyline so quickly, and the story is actually paced well over the season. But the issue that comes in with doing that is that a lot of it seems slow paced. In fact, it can take a while to get started with those 3 seasons I mentioned. I think people were a bit frustrated with the slow pace at the start of the season. I think that's very much true with season 2 of Luke Cage, because I heard some negative reviews of those who just watched like the first 5 or 6 episodes of the season is like, oh, this season's not very good. I think, honestly, that's why Iron Fist got a lot of bad press, because I actually liked Iron Fist season 1 a lot better than most people did. I think people would do hard on it, and I think one of the main issues is because they only watched the first 6 episodes, or they just watched the first 6 episodes and made up their mind like, this is slow and boring. But it's not slow and boring. They're pacing it, sort of pitching it, thinking about the whole season, not wanting to blow through the whole storyline within the first 8 episodes, which I thought a lot of the earlier Marvel Netflix shows did. Luke Cage season 2 in particular, it gets stronger as it goes on, but and I think honestly that's how a show should be. The ending of the season should be its high point. It should be its strong point. It should build up to a great ending, which is why I didn't really like season 1 of Luke Cage. I thought the ending was very lackluster. It was a lot more interesting when they had Cottonmouth at the start of the season. As soon as they killed him off, the show got less interesting, and the ending was very lackluster, which is why I didn't think highly of it. But here they built to something where you could say that the first half of the season was a bit slow, but I would say they were building. They were putting in the building blocks for this really great payoff at the end of the season, which I think was brilliant. I love the ending so much. It all worked really well. So now let me get into some of the characters and aspects of season 2. Let's start with Luke Cage himself, because that's another thing I sort of had an issue with season 1 of Luke Cage, is that the show is called Luke Cage, but almost to me felt like he was kind of just like a side character. I didn't really get a sense. He did have a lot of screen time and a lot of mention, like he was the MacGuffin everyone was talking about. We had to do something about Luke Cage, but it didn't seem like I got a real sense of the character. Sure, we got his backstory, but I didn't really get a sense of who he was now, and what he was trying to do, and what his real motivations, what kind of character is this guy? And that's something I think season 2 did a hell of a lot better, because it dealt more directly with who he is and his inner demons. What is his motivation? What is he finding as he has to deal with his new fame, where everyone has an app where they can find him, and everyone's hero worshipping when they get photos with him, but then he's nursing this really broken relationship with his father that's really kind of messed up, because his father did messed up things in the past and wants to reconcile, but he has a lot of anger and animosity that's holding over. He lets his rage get the better of him a couple of times. He does stupid things when he's provoked, like Mariah. She knows how to push his buttons, which is a very interesting concept. Shows that he's a flawed character. And the thing with Claire, where his anger pushed her away permanently, like he punched a hole in the wall. That scene was so intense. It was so good. And then we don't get no Claire for the rest of the season. So I love that they're exploring his character more. I think they did a much better job. And I love how the main conflict of the season wasn't necessarily against Luke Cage like it was in season 1, where Diamondback had an issue. He had to get Luke Cage, and even the first half of the season, Cottonmouth was obsessed with getting Luke Cage, whereas in season 2, he wasn't the main focus. The main focus was a gripe that Bushmaster had against Mariah, and Luke Cage was just caught in the middle of it. And I love that, and I actually think this allowed for them to develop Luke Cage's character more by doing this, because we got to see get into his sort of mindset and how he feels about what's happening to the city, and how he wants to deal with it, and a lot of it is interpersonal relationships, which I thought was really well done. So the other thing, one thing I really liked about this season, especially when compared to Jessica Jones Season 2, is because in Jessica Jones Season 2, one of my main gripes, if you saw my review I did on that, was they kind of pretended like the Defenders didn't exist. They just pushed that aside. They almost reset the character growth she made in the Defenders and just pretend like that never happened. They never reference it, and even in the slightest bit. So I was worried that the Marvel Netflix shows that would be a permanent thing, is that they would see the Defenders as a mistake and try to wipe it clean. But Luke Cage Season 2 references it a lot, and I'm glad. And I think in many cases they had to, especially with Misty Knight, because she had lost her arm, and to set up for her having a bionic arm, it was so really obvious that's why they were doing it, so they could set up for her having a bionic arm like she did in the comic books. But it wasn't just that. They actually went full on. They referenced, like, they had Colleen show up from Iron Fist, like, because they met her during the Defenders, and she's friends with Misty Knight. They had that one scene with her, and of course, he had Iron Fist himself show up in the episode, which I was surprised. I did not think they would do. Everyone is actually saying that is the best episode of the season. On IMDb is currently the highest rated episode of Luke Cage at all. I'm not sure if I think that highly of it, but it was a good episode. It did seem kind of like it was a bit obvious that it was in the contract that he only could appear in one episode, because he just showed up for the one episode and helped Luke Cage take down this, drug thing, and then just left, which that seemed a bit contrived in terms of, they could only get the actor for one episode, but it was a good episode. Now, I heard a lot of people saying, oh, they're fixed Iron Fist. He's actually more interesting. He's better in this episode. They did Iron Fist right for the first time. I never had a problem with Iron Fist in the first place, to be honest. I mean, I talked about this in my Iron Fist review. I'm not as big of a fan of these kung fu movies, so perhaps when they're fighting scenes, I don't really know the particular art behind it. So perhaps I'm a layman in that, and that's why I didn't have an issue with it. But still, I never had an issue with him. I thought he was a fully developed character. And honestly, I don't see his appearance here as any better or worse. I think it's pretty much a continuation, especially of what we saw of him in Defenders and his relationship with Luke Cage and the Defenders. So I don't see it as like they saved Iron Fist, but I do love that they brought him back, and I do love that they tried to develop his character more, and I love that they didn't just wipe clean what happened in Defenders. They had Claire mention the thing about Daredevil being killed and stuff like, and the incident that happened in Defenders and how that affected how people view Luke Cage and Misty Knight. So I love that they actually kept continuity with the Defenders, and of course having the relationship with Rand. They could go to this little, when they wanted to hide from Bushmaster, they called up Danny Rand and had him get one of their warehouses he wasn't using so they could hide at, and stuff like, and of course he actually did show up to help Luke Cage hunt down a few people. So I love that. I like that. I think that puts it ahead of Jessica Jones Season 2, who for some reason tried to pretend the Defenders didn't exist. Which, regardless of what you think of that show, the season, was it good, was it not good, it exists. And it should be acknowledged in this universe. I personally hope they do a Defenders Season 2, because even though they failed with Season 1, I think it's I still like the concept. I think they should just do the concept better, keeping the gritty feel that's inherent in these Marvel Netflix shows. But getting off track here. Anyway, getting back to Luke Cage Season 2, I mentioned Claire a bit. I like the fact that she wasn't a main thing in the season, because they had to acknowledge that she was in a relationship with Luke Cage, and I think if you look outside the universe into like real life production, Rosario Dawson said that she wanted to take a little backseat from the Marvel Netflix shows, because previously she was in practically every show, but she didn't appear in Punisher, and she didn't appear in Jessica Jones Season 2, so it's obvious she's saying that she wants to take a back seat, so you could say that was behind the scenes reasons of why they broke her and Luke Cage up, and why she only appeared in like 4 episodes of this season, is because she doesn't want to appear as much. But the way they did it, I think, really works in the story. And as I said, that scene where he punched a hole in the wall was so powerful, and you could really get the sense of the kind of relationship they had, and how he could feel like she was just pushing him too far. And it was really interesting how at the end of the season, when Luke Cage turned her all gangster, and I'll get more into that later, how she wanted to see him, and he said, "I'm not seeing her anymore." And I think that was because he knew that she would be totally against what he was doing, and he just didn't want to hear it. But still, that's really dark to just flat out turn her down like that. Some people could imply it's showing that he's becoming evil, but I don't think that. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. But the thing is I love their use of Claire, and I love the fact that we didn't get much of her, because, to be honest, I have been a bit sick of her. I think they have overused her, but particularly in Iron Fist, she felt shoehorned in. So I don't mind, and they had to explain why she's breaking up with Luke Cage, and I think the way they did it was great. It was powerful. It made total sense. So I love the use or lack of use of Claire this season. So the season also had the return of Shades and Mariah from season 1, which, has to say, in the first couple episodes, it felt like I wasn't interested in these characters. I think I complained about them in season 1, particularly Shades. I thought he was a bit annoying. He'd pop up and hound Cottonmouth and be like, "Blue, blue, 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 you suck," and he really annoyed him. And again, I thought season 2 got into both of these characters a hell of a lot more, a lot deeper. Like, I don't know, the thing with Shades and Comanche, where you found out, like, they had this, prison relationship, which Comanche was still sort of attached to, and Shades wanted to forget about, that brought an interesting dynamic. Although, like, the thing about Comanche keep, like, hounding Mariah, that felt dumb, that felt a bit forced, and especially since when you find out that he's a snitch, it's like, well, why is he being such a dick to Mariah if he's a snitch? It seems like he's making it a bit too obvious. And the whole thing about him being a snitch and Shades finding out and killing him, and it wasn't bad, but it wasn't particularly good either. To me, it was one of the low points of the season. I was less interested in this whole storyline, but I do like how they developed Shade's character a lot more. I think that little relationship he had with Comanche did add to his character, which they used to build some of the more important storylines with his relationship with Mariah, which led to him becoming a snitch by the end of the season, which I totally bought. Made total sense, particularly when she went crazy and killed all the people at the cafe. That was intense, and that was also great character journey for Mariah, seeing how at the start of the season she just wanted to go sort of get in the straight and narrow and kind of get out of the business, but because of all the stuff that was happening with her and Bushmaster, just turned her more into a gangster, more into this bloodthirsty maniac, basically, to the point where Shades didn't recognize her anymore and wanted nothing to do with her, because that was the path it was too much even for him, which I completely buy, because he even said, like, there are rules to this game. You don't just go to a cafe and kill a bunch of innocent people. It's just not how you do it. And so she's just gone crazy and crossed the line, and the way they slowly built to that was amazing and made all the sense in the world. It was really intense. I totally bought when he turned on her. It was so good. It was really dynamic storytelling, and it's really interesting the season overall, the way how Luke Cage, it wasn't as easy as you're the villain and I'm the hero, because at one point he was working with Mariah against Bushmaster, and then at another point he was working with Bushmaster against Mariah, and some people might think, oh, that's a bit confusing, but it's not. I love that dynamic to it, as there's thinning the line. And now let me get into Tilda, the introduction of Mariah's Daughter, which I loved. I thought was done really well. One of the most intense and best acted scenes all season was when Mariah was coming clean to her daughter Tilda and telling her the truth about who her father was and what happened and how she doesn't love her. She's just pretending to love her because her actual father was her uncle who had sexually abused and raped her. So that was so powerful. That was so intense. And it actually helped you to relate to Mariah more. It actually helped you to sympathize with her more. And I love that dynamic to it. But at the same time, it showed her as this evil person for rejecting her own daughter because of things that are outside of her control. Like, she can't control who her father was or how the circumstances of her birth. It was also such a powerful acted scene seeing Tilda's reaction to find out her roots, because this whole time she thought this really, you know, upstanding, nice citizen guy was her father, but apparently he was actually gay and just using Mariah as a cover for that to hide his homosexuality. So it's very complex, very interesting, and I think it makes Tilda such an interesting character too. How at first she was kind of didn't want anything to do with this crime of life, but by the end of the season you get that they're kind of building her to be the next villain. And again, her journey made total sense, from Bushmaster wanting to kill her at first, and then all of a sudden her helping Bushmaster to kill her own mother. Of course, part of it did have to do with that revelation and the fact that she outright said, "I don't love you," and I just pretend to. So that's kind of good motivation. Plus, she could see how evil her mother had become by killing all those people at the cafe. And then her sort of strenuous relationship with Luke Cage. Love that. Very complex, very dynamic. I think it really worked. Now, speaking of Bushmaster, there's another. He was a really good villain, because at first, from the previews, I was like, oh, they're doing the whole Diamondback thing again, where someone who's powerful than Luke Cage, who's also bulletproof, is going to come in and beat up Luke Cage, and that's how it played out at the beginning, the first couple episodes. And I was just like, and this guy's just a bit of an asshole. I got really annoyed by the fact he kept saying Mariah Stokes. Mariah, every time someone tried to say her other name, can't even remember what her other last name is, but he kept saying Stokes. And I was like, I think they overplayed that a bit. I got really sick of hearing it. I was like, okay, enough. Her name's Stokes. Just shut up about it already. But anyway, so I didn't find him that interesting in the first half of the season. But then you get his backstory, you see the flashbacks of him as a kid, that the Stokes had like killed his mother, ruined his family unjustly so, and stole their fortune. It's why this season is so good. A character you thought was just this evil asshole turned out to be a lot more dynamic than that, and especially seeing his relationship with his uncle and his aunt, and how they didn't want anything to do with all this crime, but and how he was sort of the anchor and he loved them. It was really good. So then I totally bought, even though he was like the main villain who was trying to kill Mariah, and you were like, oh, Luke Cage was protecting her, and then it changes from him working with Luke Cage to take down Mariah, who's now, she's become out of control. And I think that makes sense for Luke Cage too, because his thing isn't against any one person in particular. It's to keep Harlem safe. So whoever it is who is trying to do the most damage to Harlem at a particular time is who he's going to want to stop, and so he's going to team up with whoever. So at one stage it was Bushmaster, and another stage it was Mariah. And again, I love the complexity to it, and I love Bushmaster's relationship with Tilda, how he wanted to kill her at first, but then he ended up like she saved his life, and he ended up like actually liking her and respecting her for that, because I think it would have been really dumb if he just turned around like, oh, thank you for saving my life, and just killed her. That would have made him a cliche mustache twirling villain, but he didn't do that. He respected her for it, and that to me makes him a lot more interesting, a lot more dynamic. This season was great for having rich, complex villain characters and not just the typical mustache twirly villains. Absolutely great for that. And we also get, as I said, we get a bit more Misty Knight and her getting the bionic arm, but I did like how they didn't play too much into it. I thought they would make her more of a superhero type with it. She has a bionic arm, but really they were just playing it off as a prosthetic, which I liked. I liked they didn't put too much emphasis on that. And of course you get the relationship with her and the other detective who doesn't like her. I don't know, to me that was another weaker part of the season, especially when the other detective ended up selling out the Bushmaster, because so she, I thought it was interesting when Misty, after the police chief or whoever he was, the boss, he died, and Misty had to take over. I thought it was a really nice scene where she went to her and was like, I would trust you, if I died, I would trust you to find. So I liked how they were repairing that relationship. So when it turned out that she was just snitching and went to Bushmaster for the money, I was like, now they're just going a cliche route, which to me is a lot less interesting. So it was kind of something I didn't really care that much about. And like she had a flashback episode where she was flashing back to Scarf and all the people got set free because he turned out to be nasty. That to me wasn't one of the strong points of the season. So, Misty Knight to me wasn't one of the more interesting concepts of the season, but I did think she was used well in a lot of places, like having to have to deal with Mariah, and then later having to have to deal with Shades, which was really interesting, really satisfying when she showed up to arrest Shades after Mariah was killed, because Shades was too stupid to send his lawyer away before reading the fine print. That was a really great twist. So anyway, let me get into this ending, because I thought this ending was one of the best things about the season. It was really powerful. And again, it's getting into the whole anti-hero thing, where Luke Cage is starting to become more of the villain, where he decides to become the king of Harlem. His solution to all... And I love how there was this huge, increase in crime when Mariah was arrested, because there was a vacuum there. And so it made Luke recognize that there needs to be this order kept. So his solution is to become and not to take down the crime, because he realized that's never going to happen, because if there's a vacuum, more crime will just come in and it will just make things worse. So his solution is to sort of be the conduit that keeps the balance in Harlem, but his reasoning is that he's not a crime lord, but that he's keeping crime under control and leveling it out. But other people were thinking, you're basically a crime lord, and that leaves Misty and Luke in a very precarious place. And as I said, he wouldn't even talk to Claire, and Mariah is saying that she knows that the club and having that power is going to corrupt him, even though he thinks it won't. That is very fascinating. That is very powerful. That is a great way to end the season. Unlike season 1, they ended it with Luke getting arrested, which I did not like at all. I thought that's just a cheesy way to end the season. This was a hell of a lot more powerful. It played into his character journey of the season, and it left it at a dark and interesting place. It made me really, really wanting to see season 3 of Luke Cage, where so far, even with Jessica Jones, Daredevil, I'm not as interested in seeing the next season. If there's another season, sure, I'll watch it, but now with Luke Cage now, I'm like, I really can't wait to see season 3, because that was just such a powerful way to end the season. Anyway, my rating for Luke Cage season 2 out of 10 is a 9. Excellent, absolutely amazing season. It was a bit slow in places. It started a bit slow. Some of the stuff with Misty Knight and that little thing she was going on with was not that interesting. And Bushmaster came off a bit uninteresting at first, but as I said, the show actually built beautifully to a really powerful ending with a lot of really dynamic characters, interesting character acting, and a lot of good action sequences as well that were really suspenseful, really exciting, exactly what you want out of a Marvel Netflix show. So an absolutely amazing season. Anyway, that is it for my review of Luke Cage Season 2. Be sure to check out my channel, as I do many more videos on other shows like Star Trek, Game of Thrones, Babylon 5, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.